Can we just agree that Mumbo loses?
Yeah.
More like build oof, am I right? What is up the world we live in? My name is Lex and welcome back to Sahara Street BuildOff retrospective. That Civil War retrospective I promised? Later, turns out wars have a lot of confusing events happening. Who would have thought? This competition on the other hand is quite simple. It's 3 to 6 people pretty desperately trying to get the tallest house before one of them hits the build limit. And yet they never take advantage of armor stands being entities and being able to go over the build limit. They have the armor stand book on the server that totally allows them to build with them. For shame. But instead of focusing on what didn't happen, let's focus on what did. Let's talk about Hermitville's tallest house build-off.
You know what they say about people that compensate with very tall houses in Minecraft.
And it all started when the Hermitcraft server first updated to 1.14. In the wake of the update, the Hermits have moved out from their islands into a remote spruce village. Grian, Mumbo, Iskall and Stress Monster happened to claim houses in a line, forming the Sahara Street. Since this was supposed to be a temporary holdout, the gang decided to take it slow and only added a few modifications to the houses they took from villagers. But then Iskall did not get the memo. His house had to be rebuilt entirely into a modern design of concrete and stone. I actually feel like this one doesn't get as much credit as it deserves, because it's a great balance of modern theme and the original spruce planks to cobblestone aesthetic. But my oh my, if you want to talk spruce planks, do I have a Grian for you. His response was basically to stab another house into his own house, therefore making it twice the house Iskall could ever be. Mumbo apparently was expecting this. He specifically waited for these two to finish building their houses so he can adjust accordingly and build his one taller than the rest. Arguably, he's the one who openly had a goal of besting the other two in house height, as I'm pretty sure he already is taller than them both in real life.
I'll tell you what, Mumbo Jumbo. I'm just kidding, Mumbo. We love you really. But you can't have the biggest house, I'm afraid.
And now that Mumbo too has transformed his house into a very Mumbo build of sugar cubes on grey, it's Iskall's humble abode that was looking the humblest in comparison.
It's looking really dumb. It's like a staircase right now.
Instead of solving this by expanding his already existing design, Iskall opted for a different strategy. He builds a second house for himself, one floating over the competitors on a bundle of wool balloons. Truly he's shown the rest of the street what's up. Grian catches up to both by adding even more house on top of his house. I believe in architecture this is referred to as a clump. It goes petty for a bit, Mumbo as an antenna, Grian as a pike, but both of them soon shift their focus at Iskall's up house. Mumbo's master plan is pretty brilliant. Atop his roof, he builds a rocket pad that not only instantly makes it taller than Grian's cluster build, but also has a functional slime block rocket on it. When launched, this thing will crawl as high as possible, potentially ending the whole debacle. In the race to the build limit, this is very much a nuke. But that's when a whole new faction literally falls from the sky. What you have to know about GoodTimesWithScar is that he didn't have a Hermitville house at all until this. He actually was living out of a completely different village, stuck in it with no way of transportation, until he builds himself a rocket and crushes it right opposite Grian's spruce plank tower. Having taken a look at the current state of things, he very much goes, hold my non-alcoholic beverage, tunes the back thruster zone and launches what's left of his rocket right into the winning position. Had to make it into a house on the way there to qualify as a contestant.
Goes up, doesn't come down in Minecraft.
Okay, this is hilarious, especially because of how it coincides with Grian deciding that Iskall doesn't really understand the gravity of the situation. He catches Iskall's outhouse, ties a giant anvil to it, then rebuilds the whole structure, block by block, way lower on top of Iskall's roof. He is very much the physics this game deserves, just not ones that would make it fun to play actually. Accidentally, this causes Scar's floating house to be the top point of the area. And no Concord person is ever winning a Sahara Street build-off. especially because he technically isn't even on the Sahara Street. Grian builds up his house array even taller, making sure to add an overhang towards Mumbo's rocket, so Wing of It hits a rogue block and stops the slime block machine in its tracks. But all is for naught, because Stress Monster places a beacon in her house below, and as the beacon beam goes all the way to the build limit, wins everything. I really mean it, by the way, that's why there's so much video left after this point.
Now who's got the tallest house, eh?
Really, by this point there were plenty of people pointing out in the comments that high is not tall, so Scar had to connect his house to the ground somehow, if he wanted any claim in the competition. We'll argue semantics in a more spicy bit of the video at the end, but for now, let's all at the solution he came up with. The rocket he arrived on supposedly left quite a bit of destruction in the crater, fire of it still burning despite many days have passed. Not willing to endanger himself over it, Scar calls in HEP, a made-up Hermitcraft environment protection service. The hazmat specialists dig into the problem and find that when originally the rocket crashed here, it left a steel radiating reactor in the ground. HEP's solution, however, was not to dispose of a dangerous whatchamajig, but to bury it even deeper in the same spot, then plant a tree on top of it and pretend nothing has happened at all. The radiation from the core mutated the tree, and a giant beanstalk with a flower on top rose to the sky to hold Scar floating island in place, and reach just a tiny bit higher than Grian's house. As per usual, Grian builds another peak tiny bit higher than that. As not per usual, Scar builds a laser cannon and lasers that peak off. While the two of them are squabbling, Iskall encases his balloon house in a glass cylinder, as to prevent the balloons from escaping and polluting the environment. Yes, really, he had a complaint from RenDog the hippie. To make sure no more escape, he plugs the cylinder with another level of ground, then props it down with a model of Empire State Building, for no other reason that it's tall and imposing. It is then instantly attacked by Grian redirecting Scar's laser onto it. Scar too gets nudged a tiny bit lower when Grian catapults a sizable rock chunk at the flower of his plant. Seeing that the things have gotten heated, Mumbo pulls the trigger on his nuke and blasts off literally sky high on his slime block rocket. The little overhang Grian added to prevent this only took out a single stabilizer on its side. The rest and the Mump successfully reached stratosphere.
He has been bested. That is the best thing ever.
To legitimize his achievement, he adds a smoke trail from the launch pad to the rocket. So in a way, the race to build limit was won. It's just no one was brave enough to tell that to Scar's man-eating flower.
No, Scara. That's not insulting.
Yep, that's a thing that happened. Not fond of its flower being smashed, the beanstalk holding Scar's house in place mutated into a giant sentient Venus flytrap, which just makes me personally terrified of the size of the fly that thing would feed on. It then mutated another branch, spewing toxic projectiles in retaliation. One blast of it goes for Grian, the other for Mumbo's rocket. But that turns out to be unnecessary. The Sky Limit satellite has already been pulled back by a supersized magnet Iskall mounted on the Empire State model.
All in all though, this looks absolutely chaotic.
What is very entertaining about this though is that because my rocket is on top of Iskall's build, I'm still beating him, so at least I'm not last.
The rogue projectile ended up being bounced back by a slime block tennis racket from Grian. Plus, Iskall deflects their laser eaten through his build back at Sahara State too. So together they take out both of the eyes of the overgrown rhododendron. Also, Grian adds even more house on top of his house. I know, I sound like a broken record, but I have legitimately run out of humorous ways to explain him building more house sections to catch up. It looks super pretty, don't get me wrong. I just wish I had as much fun writing about it as I have with the giant plant in a house from up. Or about RenDog's alter ego suddenly crushing the party. RenDog the hippie undigs the reactor from Scar's rocket, puts it into his camper van, then blasts off right into the top spot of the entire competition. The rule of not attached to ground might apply here, but it's really hard to be pedantic about, considering that the smoke trail the van left behind has more detail put in it than anything I personally have built in Minecraft ever. Don't worry though, there's plenty of more bonkers to go around. Having healed the peepers of his door plant, Scar tunes her into a wizard. That is a sentence I just said. Equipped with a starry hat, glasses and a magic wand, Scara casts a protective shield, disabling the laser still going for her eyeballs. She then casts another spell that turns Iskall's glass tube into an aquarium. Just to be mean, I suppose. Can you tell I'm having a mental breakdown? Cause I'm about to. Iskall then turns his magnet into complete overdrive mode, which results in the freaking moon appearing on top of it. But not after he launches Mumbo's rocket sideways at Grian's tower tree. That didn't even aid him at making Grian's house shorter at all. He just felt like stabbing it with a rocket, I guess. Don't worry, Grian then literally punched his house for it. With a boxing glove and everything. Anyway, the moon is still not big enough to put Iskall over the rest of the competition. So, as very confused werewolves howl in the background, the Swede builds a moon base on it. But at this point, Grian has a brilliant and amazing plan that was just crazy enough to leave the rest of the competition behind. Transform the entire house array into a giant robot. He ended up not doing it, so rest assured there is still some chill left, just not that much. The main reason he decided against it is he didn't actually like the way it would look, based on the sketches he did in creative. I think it's best we trust his standards, as much as I would like to get a copyright strike for using the Power Rangers theme. What he did instead is pretty amazing too. A fire-breathing dragon built in an organic style guarding the skyscraper as if it was his personal hoard of houses. Hitting the finishing line, everybody involved went into complete overdrive. Especially RenDog, who, seeing a dragon and what's later become of Scar's build, has hit warp 1 and zooped into sunrise.
Goodbye, Hermitville. RenDog will smell you later, man.
Mumbo too decided to opt out of the experience. He made a white flag rising through the space between the houses and going all the way up to the build limit. Sending really mixed messages here, but whatever. Scar's endgame was pretty clear and logical here. The beanstalk went into a storming cloud that had a castle with a giant living in it. All in accordance with the fairy tale, though I guess Brothers Grimm obviously left out a giant man-eating Venus flytrap out of their version. Instead of any random giant, however, Scar has put a bigger version of himself in charge of the perimeters, armed with a cannon to fend off house-holding dragons. They then fired it at Grian, but the dragon deflected the blast into Mumbo's white flag. Iskall went just as crazy for his grand finale. Revenge is the dish best cold. And it's really cold in space. So why not put a giant penguin up there? Who dubs? I would be mad, but I'm gonna pretend this is a Starbound reference instead. Grian, in the meantime, built more spruce houses. The dragon was already almost at the build height. It was either that or giving the dragon a beehive hairstyle or something. With nowhere else to grow, because none of them thought to use armor stands for building, the three met up at the rooftops to finally decide who is winning this thing. Then it turned out that Scar was still one block short.
How do you guys think we should finish the build-up?
I don't know, but I know one person being on 256, which is build limit, Scar.
Should have been more sportsmanlike and told me.
On the ground, in a more civilized atmosphere, they chose to let a vote decide this. Each of them would rate the other two, then the sum would show the winner. And after reluctant compliments were exchanged, the points tallied up to 55 across the board. The three of them had exactly the same score, which was fine by them. And so, the Sahara Street BuildOff finished in a proper tie.
55. 50. We got exactly the same score.
Oh yeah, we all got 50.
Are you kidding? No, someone check the maths. I'm not confident enough with numbers to know.
Except for Mumbo, who lost. Which is something I think all of us can agree on. Can we? Okay, so here's the thing. We already pulled that everyone's a winner stuff on the Civil War recap and on the Prank War retrospective. The three of them getting exactly the same amount of points on accident is a hilarious and a satisfying end to the story, but not a satisfying and hilarious end to this video. So let's budge in as a fourth party and ruin it for everybody. First and foremost, we need to decide what are we even judging them for. If we take this as a race to the build limit, then Mumbo is the undisputable winner. Back when he launched his rocket, it easily reached the mark and even Grian's tomfoolery didn't stop it. But that would mean that we don't get the most entertaining part of the competition at all. And also that with, say, Scar just built his antenna longer by 100 blocks, he would instantly win. That's just cheap. So let's give Mumbo his gold star for trying and send him home. Next, you might define the challenge as the tallest house, and argue that Grian wins because only his structure is entirely a house. Not a house on a beanstalk and not a camper one with a ton of exhaust supporting it. To which I say, you might as well then define Grian's build as a collection of very small houses, just smooshed together, and that means he loses the worst. Iskall wins because of his Empire State building. Heck, you can even dismiss all 3 builds entirely and define a house as the usable, livable portion of the build, which once again puts Mumbo as the winner because of his original design. And then you could even claim that the penguin's last name is House. Actually, to think of it, I'm surprised no one built a Hugh Laurie statue as a joke. In this shifty situation, the easiest solution would be to just leave it to the audience. And sure, here we go, poll in the iCards, but the truth of the matter is, any poll on the server full of YouTubers is instantly a popularity contest. No matter what, Grian's fanbase is so big and so in love with him that they will vote him a winner even in a competition he wasn't even a part of. Besides, I will only see the results long after the video is out, and where's the fun in that? So it seems the only fair treatment is to run with the system they themselves already installed.
Defense, stability, livability, value, and I think this is meant to be market value, so how much would this house, for example, sell for on the market?
We rate their builds based on the categories they used in the final count. And as always, everybody is entitled to their opinion, including me. So I invite you to tell me yours in the comments, and I will really appreciate it if you take time to hear mine out. First, let's take a look at the beast with 1,000 facades. Despite its jury-rigged nature, it's actually a really solid build, both thematically and visually. Its shape is intricate and it's downright pleasant to look at, even though you quickly realize that nothing but the first floor is a place you could actually use. Here's the thing about Grian's house though. While it looks super cool, in part it does so because of how little variety it has. Many shapes are different, but many of them are also repeated over and over. The materials it's made of are basically spruce and dark oak, which contrasts nice on each other, but also is basically just a whole lot of brown. As a result, when it does sacrifice a little bit of integrity, it looks somewhat out of left field. For example, here's a fire-breathing dragon on top of a house made entirely of planks. I mean, yeah, fire tickers off, but the house doesn't know that. But this mild disconnect is nothing next to the beautiful disaster that Iskall's house is. To remind you, that's a modern build with an aquarium on top of it that has the house from up in it, tied to an anvil covered with a model of Empire State Building that has the moon on a magnet on which there is a giant penguin who dubs. This build relishes in just how off the wall it is. As a result, you just can't take your eyes off of it, pondering just what happened here. And we actually know what happened. And it still makes less sense than a giant man-eating flytrap who used to be a tree. Which brings us to the little shop of horrors that is Scar's house. On a beanstalk that leads into a castle in the sky. And the beanstalk is a wizard. Where do I even begin? It sure checks the crap out of the fear factor, amusement and defense, seeing how Scar was the person with the most warfare against the rest.
He's got a laser beam, he's got a wizard, and he's got a cannon. That's quite a lot of firepower.
It might not be as complicated visually as Grian's house, and have less overall random elements as Iskall's one, but where it seriously makes up for it is that the most of it still makes sense in its own messed up way. When looking at it, you can almost reconstruct the story of this entire build. Even the rocket pod is still there, sticking out of the ground chunk. This puts the thematic integrity of the build in balance with the madness that is the wizard plant, which combined with the fact both the castle and the house pods appear actually big enough to somewhat live in, puts this one just a tiny bit over the score of the other two. And that's why I think that Scar is the winner of the Sahara Street BuildOff, despite not being on the Sahara Street, and also never actually reaching the build limit. But don't let what I think stop you from liking stuff. The whole competition was a fun ride with twists and turns and loop-de-loops. Hope this video helped you make sense of it. My name is LoyXP, this has been Hermitcraft Retrospective, personal channel in the end screen, all that. And now, if you excuse me, I have to go write a retrospective on the Hermitcraft Civil War. To be continued, have a good one, bye bye.